It's finally time for us to go ahead and start writing our application. So let's look at our flowchart once more before we start writing our application. So remember that our application needs to start, obviously, then we need to grab an option from a user. So we need to grab an input, which is going to be our option that we'll be checking and seeing if it is manual, or if it is a file, or if it is unrecognized. Based on the option, we will then provide the appropriate response. In the case when it is a manual input, we'll be asking for the user to put in comma-separated words. And in the case of a file, we're going to ask for file name. If there's nothing that we can recognize, we'll show a warning. And once we have the input, we'll be loading the word list. And afterwards, once we have loaded the scrambled words, we will be unscrambling them by comparing it against the word list. And then if there are any matches, we'll be showing them. Otherwise, we'll be not showing any matches. And then start over the process and ask the user if we want to continue or not. So that's the overall process. Now let's go ahead and start coding. Okay, so if you remember, the way I like to code is first start with a skeleton. So write the whole thing off, even though some things, some classes or functionalities might not be complete yet. So I will imagine though as if they are complete. But first I want to get the bigger picture and I want to get the skeleton down. So let's go ahead and do just that. I will go ahead and start by saying bool continue word on scramble. And I will set that to true. Then I will use a do while loop. So I will say do while. And I will leave the condition empty for now. Let me just write the body of the loop. I will say console write line. And in here, I will basically put in placeholder text for now, but later on we will change it. So I will say, please enter the option M for file and F, or rather, sorry, F for file and M for manual. Great. So this is just a placeholder text, and then I will say var option equals console read line, and then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to use a null coalesce to say if the input from a user is nothing, so there was nothing that came about, then just default to an empty string. Then I will use a switch statement, which you've already learned about, and I will say option to upper, just to normalize it. Oops. And the reason why it's underlined is because T should be uppercased. So switch to upper, and then we will write the cases. So in the case in which it's an F, which is a file, we're going to do something and then break. If it is a case for M, which is the manual input, and we got that, and then you break. And then if it's not file, if it's not manual, just the way we saw in the flowchart, then we have a default case. And obviously we break as well. Great, so now let's actually go ahead and write the specific cases. So I will say console write line. And once again, we will polish up the messages, but for now, let's actually just write something in here just so it makes sense. So I will say enter scrambled words file name. And we can do something like this. Or in this case, we actually can say write instead of saying write line. So because write line will actually then go to another line, but in this case we want to ask this question and then let the user type right after the text. It just looks much better. And then we'll have another message for M. We will say enter scrambled words manually. All right. And then for a default case, when nothing worked and we weren't able to recognize any of the options, we'll say something like option was not recognized. Great. So then after we write it, we have to do something, right? So I will actually write a method which then I will complete afterwards. We'll say execute scrambled words in file scenario. And you can name it anything you want. I just decided to name my method like this because it's pretty descriptive and you know the intention behind it. And for this one, I will say execute scrambled words manual entry scenario. Great. And each scenario will be a method, obviously, which will be coming after the main method. So we can actually create those. I can actually right-click on them, or sorry, not right-click, but generate the method automatically. As you can see, they're not implemented yet. So we have these methods sitting here. Once again, they're just dummy methods for now. They're not doing anything. They're just sitting there. And we'll fill them up later on. But for now, let's keep going with our general structure. Let's step back for a second, though. Now, these methods that I have created yet did not complete, let's talk about these. The intention behind these methods is so that whenever we say either do this manually or do it through a file, they're going to go through the entire process, meaning that in each method, we will be loading the word list. We will be going ahead and doing the matching process, which is matching the scrambled words against the word list and then unscrambling them as a process. And it's basically going to take care of the entire scenario, hence why I said scenario, right? But afterwards, as you remember from the flowchart, we need to ask the user whether they want to continue on with the process. So this is another do-while loop, meaning that we at least want to ask them once about this. And then afterwards, if they say yes or no, then we will stop it. If they don't say yes or no, then we need to keep asking them whether they want a yes or no. Because if they give us a gibberish answer, we don't know what to do. So we need to keep asking them until they give us an answer that we know how to respond to. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say do and while. So this is the structure. But I need a variable up on top. And I will call that variable continue word unscramble decision. So let's try to spell this correctly. Continue word unscramble decision equals, and in this case, I'm sorry, it's not true. It's basically an empty string, meaning that this is either going to be y or it's going to be n. In the while condition, I will be saying while the continue word unscramble decision is not yes or it's not no. So if the continue word unscramble decision is not yes, rather, and it's not no, then continue on asking whether they want to continue it or not, right? Because if it's not either one of these, then we don't really know how to respond to it. So we need to keep asking them. Now, here's one more thing. We can make these case insensitive by saying string comparison dot ordinal ignore case, because then whether they put in uppercase n or lowercase y or any of the other combinations, then we're still going to be fine. I can just do it like this. So in this case, now we have our condition. You can either do them like this, or you can basically, it's just that the variable name is very long. That's why the whole line is very long. But we can also do it like this. Either way is fine. So if it's not y and it's not n, then continue on looping. But what do we have in the loop? Let's do that. I'm going to say console, right line this time. And then I'm going to say, do you want to continue the program? Very simple. And even, do you want to continue? Now, let's actually get an input from the user. So we'll say, in parentheses, console read line, you only know how to get an input from a user, but the user might not input anything, so this might come back as null. So we want to coalesce it, and we want to say, as a default, just say that it's an empty string. And then we will say that's it, because the continue word unscramble decision will be now a string from a user. Now it can be ABC, it can be their name, it can be anything they want, but unless it's Y or it's N, the loop will not stop. And if it is yes or it is no, meaning if it is Y or N, then we can actually do this here, then it will stop. But so once it stops, what do we do then? And that's the next question that we will answer. Now, what we want to do is we want to say, based whether it's a yes or no, remember this variable that we used? Great. So this variable now we will be using here. And we will actually be putting that in our outer while. So while continue word unscramble is true, right? We're going to do our first iteration. Every time our first iteration is guaranteed. After the first iteration, then we will be checking this Boolean variable, which is continue word unscramble. Do we want to continue our application? If not, then stop it. If yes, then continue on. But how do we figure out whether it's true or false? That's what we're going to be doing on the next line. So I will say that variable, that Boolean, is going to equal to whether continue word unscramble decision equals to yes. So if it equals to yes, so let's say yes, and we do string comparison or null in our case, then it will be true. If it is not yes, if it is no, which it has to be, because if it's not N or Y, then this loop will not stop. So if it is yes, this will be true. If it is no, then obviously this will be false. And if it's false, then the whole program will stop. So we basically have the structure down now. And this will even work, but it will not do anything, obviously. We can actually test it out real quickly. So it will say, please enter the option F or M. We will say M. And the reason why it broke is because it's not implemented. So in this case, let me actually go ahead and not do anything, because it's still a void anyways, so that's fine. But I will run it again, and we will say M, and it says enter scrambled words manually. Do you want to continue or not? And that's because there was nothing done, right? There was nothing done in the method, because enter words manually just said that, and then it called this method, which did nothing, and then it came here, and now it's asking me this question. Now I'm going to say yes, I want to continue, so it will ask me again, right? Because now it's true. It's continue word unscramble is still true. So I can say, oh, this time I want to use a file, and it's going to do its thing. Obviously, it's just going to instantaneously say, do you want to continue? Because there was nothing done in the method. And I'm going to say, you know what? This time I don't want to continue, and it's going to close, and it's right here, which is great. As you can see, the code is still a little bit out there. It's not everything is clean, and we still need to work on the messaging, and we still need to work on the naming of the variables, naming of the methods. Maybe if some of the things we don't like, we need to change, and we want to make some of the things as constants. We need to do error handling. There's a bunch of stuff we still need to fill out these methods, but the skeleton is done, and we want to do iterative development. We want to start from somewhere and then improve upon that.